Hey, my name is Brent here on Cloudy with a Chance of Meeples. Today, we're checking out some cute dragons in Dragonkeepers. A drafting game in which you'll be collecting certain dragons, building up different amulets, maybe collecting some dragon eggs as well. I'm going to show you how this game plays in the radar overview, but just so you know, anytime I say yellow, I'm referring to a white dragon. Just so you know. Sometimes the mouth goes faster than the brain. Final forecast coming up. First, cue thunder. So the radar overview for Dragonkeepers looks something like this. In this game, you will be set collecting different types of dragons. There are 4 different types of dragons in this game. Blue, yellow, you have, it says red, but to me that is orange. And then you also have green. That looks like this. They're swamp dragons. I'll also say that there are some shadow dragons, and they are wild cards. On your turn, you will be taking cards from one of these 2 stacks, or both of them. You can take from either or, any variation. You can take up to 3 cards. So either 1, 2, or 3. You can never take 0. So anytime you take a card, you will, let's say I'll take this one, I would then flip this down. And let's say I take this one, and I flip this down. And finally, I'm just going to take this green one, and I'll flip this down. That will be the end of my, start of my turn. It will be the end of the start. No. Yes, that will be the first phase of my turn. At that point, I would look at all the cards in my hand. If I have exactly 1 green dragon, I can play it down. So I look at the cards in my hand. I do, in fact, have exactly 1 green dragon. But before I play whatever the magic book says, I can manipulate it if I would like. So let's say instead of 1 green dragon, I wanted to do, I can flip both. I can manipulate one or both sides. I want to do 2 white dragons. As you can see on all these cards, it has a blue dragon, but on the back it shows you what number it is. And on this side of the book, it has a dragon, and then it shows you what's on the back. So I want to change it to 2 white dragons. At that point, I would take my 2 white dragons. I would start collecting white dragons, and then I would get the bonus. I would get an amulet piece. I'd flip it over, and I would start building an amulet. At that point, I would also get one of these shadow dragons. And then it would be everybody in turn order's chance to also play whatever the magic book says. So anytime you manipulate the dragon book, everybody else has a chance to play on that as well. So if anybody else wants to play on that, they could play 2 white dragons, then they would be able to get an amulet piece and a wild, and then it would be the next player's turn. Later on in the game, maybe it shows, we'll go back to here, 1 green dragon. At that point, I would then play 1 green dragon. Whether it's my turn or another player's turn, I can still play on it. So you're always invested in everybody's turn, depending on what they are leaving the magic book open as. I would get an amulet piece, and then I would get one of these crystals, which I'll speak on momentarily. And then let's say later on in the game, it would come out to, it would show exactly 1 red dragon. Let's see if I can find a card that has a red dragon on it. Let's see here. Green, blue. Okay, let's say it had blue, and it had in fact said 3 blue. At that point, I could then play 3 blue. So let's say I play 3 blue. This is very important because this is kind of the whole thing of the game. As soon as you play, a 3rd and or 4th dragon down, you're blocking anything in the middle. So if I put the blue one here, I would get 2 amulet pieces. So let's say I get 1 amulet piece here and another one. I'll fill this in momentarily. At that point, for the rest of the game, I cannot play green dragons. Whereas if I would have put it like this, I would then, for the rest of the game, not been able to play white dragons. So you can only play the 2 dragons on the side. Anytime you finish an amulet piece, if you were one of the first 3 amulets to be finished, you would take one of these red pieces. They're either worth 9 or 8 points. After that, when all the red ones are gone, then you'd be taking the blue ones worth either 3 or 4 points. Depending on how many players are playing, that will reflect how many collective amulets are going to be finished, and then the game will be over. In a 2-player game, 7. In a 4-player game, 9. If I would ever, play a 4th dragon, one of each color, at that point I cannot play I cannot play white or green for the rest of the game, only red and blue. If I am the first one to play all 4 different colors, I would get one of these tokens. I get the highest one, 16, and the next player to get it, 10, and then third player to get it would be 6. So you got to decide, when are you going to box yourself out that you can't play 2 colors in the game to get the highest points. If you ever have, fulfilled a dragon thing where it has a 4 on it, I'll show you this. So 1s, I'll give you these crystals, which I'll speak on what they do. 2s give you an amulet and a wild. 4s give you a dragon egg at the end of the game. They're worth 4 points each, except whoever has the most of these flips one of their dragon eggs over, and that 4 becomes a 16. 5, if you play ever on 5 dragons, you would take the highest valued amulet piece, and then of course, if you ever have a wild, you can use it as a wild, or you can flip it over and manipulate the book and play, in this case, 6 blue. You again then get 2 amulet pieces, 1 being the highest value and 1 being the lowest value. What do you use these for? Well, any crystal you can use on your turn. You can use 1 crystal to take a 4th card, so you can take up to 4 cards. Or you can use one of the special magic chests. It says in the rules to play the base game first and then start adding the magic chests, but these are kind of just one-time abilities. You can use them again and again in the game. You just have to spend a crystal each time, but they're pretty powerful. So for example, this troll horn, when laying out a dragon card, you can ignore the placement rule and also lay out dragon cards of a color that's already between 2 other stacks. So that's pretty powerful. You can do this really quick, and if this one's in play, then you can play on any of them as long as you have a crystal. Whereas this green or hammer, instead of taking the lowest valued amulet piece, you take the next one up. This one lets you, at the beginning of your turn, take the top 2, 1 on each side. This prism ink virtually lets you ignore whatever color this is. So if it says blue and you have a crystal, you pay a crystal and you can play 3 red. You still get the bonus. This one, it's called the Twilight Flute. After playing dragon cards, you can pull all but 1 back into your hand. So, I play my 3 blue. No, I'm taking 2 of them back that I can play next on another round. And then this Swindle Feather, when playing dragon cards, 1 less dragon. So I wouldn't need to play 3, I could play 2 instead. So you can use 1 of these in a game, you can use a couple of them. All the rules on how to play with those are in this extra companion booklet, and shows you kind of the bare bones of how to play the game. Game ends, as mentioned, whenever you have a certain amount of amulets, depending on player count. 7 in a 2-player game, 9 in a 4-player game. And that, in a nutshell, is how you play Dragonkeepers. Let's move on over now and check out the final forecast. So the final forecast for Dragonkeepers, a drafting game all about dragons. Okay, dragons, all the rage these days is what I see, and this has fantastic artwork. I believe actually the designer Michael Manzel also did the artwork. And that's going to draw a lot of people in. You got those 4 different types of dragons, although it says red dragon, clearly looks orange to me. But I love it how there's different dragons. Like all the 1s, all the 2s, 3s, 4s, and the 5s are all different dragons. And then you can put them all together, each color, and kind of make one longer picture. I think that's really cool. Just the added touch and detail that went into the artwork in this game is just, I love it. And so let's talk about gameplay. This game plays in about 20 minutes. I don't know about you, but me as a dad, kids growing up, school, extracurricular activities, projects, this and that, my evenings keep getting shorter and shorter, and I don't have time for those longer games. Of course, if you follow the channel, you know that long games for me are like 60 minutes. But sometimes I don't even have 60 minutes in the evening. So I'm always looking for, a game that can play maybe 30 minutes or less. And that can get, that creative, or not creative, but those, those thinking caps on, that I can play a game and stimulate my brain in a puzzle or whatever, and then be done the game. So I'm always looking for games like that. And this kind of fits that mold, because this plays 20 minutes. And I think it's pretty legit, because everybody can play on everybody's turn, or has an opportunity to play on everybody's turn. So you're always engaged. And the whole mechanic of this game is all about that magic book. You're flipping pages and collecting pages of that magic book to then manipulate it to play dragons in your tableau. But the trick of it is, the whole time is you can only play the colors on the outside. So I feel that this game is kind of like a big game of chicken. I feel it also plays best at 2. I haven't played it at the 3-player count. Actually, I did play, my first game was at the 3-player count, and it worked out well. But the majority of my plays have been at 2, and I've also played at the 4-player count. I feel this game really shines at that 2-player count, because it is a whole game of chicken. When are you going to play that 3rd and 4th dragon to gain that, extra victory point token, but you're also setting yourself for the rest of the game that you can't play those other 2 colors of dragons? And it's kind of like a tactical thing, because when you're playing in a 2-player count, you can look at your one opponent and see, oh, they blocked in their blue. I'm now just not going to block in my blue dragons for the rest of the game, so that they can play on my turn. And I like that. In a 3 and 4-player game, typically somebody is always going to be able to play at least one, or at least one other player is going to be able to play cards on your turn. But in that 2-player, I love that whole head-to-head. I love the whole manipulation of that dragon book. You feel so sneaky. I love it that you can, use those shadow dragons to either add to a set or to have a huge turn. You put that down and put down 6 red dragons or orange dragons and gain, 2 amulet pieces, one being the highest, but yes, one being the lowest. But depending on when you play that in the game, the lowest still might be 10 and the highest could be 16 or 20. So you could have a huge turn. And depending on, chances are your opponent doesn't have 6 of that color dragon. Chances are they might, but they may not have that, so they won't be able to play on their turn. The backside of that, or the downside of that, is the next player will then obviously collect that wild dragon so that they can use it for themselves. So you got to be careful when you're going to be, what are you going to be doing with those shadow dragons? Putting them down in your set, or using it for a giant turn. I haven't talked about the dragon eggs, but I like that. Collecting those dragon eggs. You have the most, you flip one from 4 to 16 points. That could be pretty big. And then you have the magic books. And these, I would suggest, if you're playing, only play with these after a few games, because it'll take you a few turns or a few games to really figure out how the whole mechanics work with these cards. Of course, it has a blue dragon on the back of this one. It has a green dragon on the back of this one. But I often found that those that I was playing with were looking at the backs of their cards until they played it enough, so they didn't have to. So then they can kind of figure it out. It's hard to explain when until you're playing it. It shows the dragon, and then it shows the dragon on the back, or the number on the back, or what have you. So after you've settled in with that, bring out these, and these will change things up immensely. The whole thing of the game is you can't play cards that are sandwiched between 2 other dragons. But when you play with these magic chests and you play with the troll horn, as long as you have a crystal to discard, you can play on any card in your tableau. That kind of flips the whole game on its head. Of course, you need to have one of those crystals, and you gain a crystal when you play only the single dragon. And at the beginning of the game, you may play a lot of single dragons, gain a lot of crystals, but you're also only getting the lowest amulet token. So your amulets are going to be pretty low value. And as the game progresses, they get, higher and higher. But these are great. Like the feather, you pay one less dragon. I forget what this one's called. Weed, dill, I don't know, something weed of sorts. You can take the top 2 cards. So you can virtually have like 5 cards on your turn. The prism ink. They treat all the dragons as wild. The little flute of sorts, thistle flute, I don't know. It says in the back of the rule book. What does it say? Twilight flute. You can collect, you put all those dragons down and then you can take all but one back. And so these just shake up the game a little bit. And they can be pretty powerful. It says you can play with one. If you're an advanced player, play with multiple ones. The choice is yours. But for this little box, it's got, quite a bit to think about. And I don't want to say like this is a brain burner by any stretch of the imagination. It's not. It's still a card game, but it's got that, that tension as to when you're going to sandwich those dragons and what everybody else is doing and how you're going to leave that magic book open, because you may not be able to play on it, but your opponents all have a chance to play on it. And so you got to watch out for that. Overall, I really liked it. The biggest thing I don't like about this game are these amulet tokens, which this is like the whole thing in the game. You're building these amulets, which it's a lot of fun building them and then putting that little gem in the middle. But you have to flip them all over at the beginning, take out a certain amount for player counts, and then flip them back and then stack them in the numbers. So there are quite a bit of them. I think you take out 16 of them in a 2-player game. So, there's a decent amount of them. It's a little fiddly. Once you get going, the game is pretty smooth and it's over before you know it. But that's kind of like my biggest thing for the game. That I don't know how they could have gotten around it, but my biggest, I guess, negative to the game. Overall, I'm giving this one an 80% chance Meeples because I really did enjoy it. It's just a lot of fun manipulating that book, feeling sneaky, going for those big turns to get those big amulet tokens values, and to use these magic books in creative ways. And so I recommend checking out Dragonkeepers if you're looking for 30 minutes or less card game. Check out Dragonkeepers. My name is Brent. Check us out on Facebook, Cloudy the Chance Meeples. Till next time, grab your umbrella. The forecast is cloudy with the Chance of Meeples.